What's up, everybody, and welcome. I hope y'all are doing good and the new year is treating you well. Today's video is going to be the second in the DIY series, so without further ado, let's get into it. So today, I'm going to be building a pair of Cappy VP28s. The VP28, it's similar to a 312, however, it is an entirely different animal all in its own right. The VP28 can be thought of as being two 312s stuck together, as it is a dual stage amplifier. Now, the biggest difference is that it functions not only as a mic pre, but also as a line amplifier, and it operates very similar to a console channel. It also has its own built-in high-pass filter with multiple modes selectable on the front panel, which makes this unit multifaceted and great for a multitude of different operations. So something to take note of is that the VP312 on its output only has trim functionality. The VP28, however, has an additional 12 dB of gain, so you can get some really good saturation if you need it for your particular source. This is why it functions more like a console channel, because the output control tends to operate more like a fader. This gives you a lot of different options that you can use it for different sources or mixing, mastering, whatever you need it for. So the VP28 is really, as I stated before, an entirely different animal, and it is extremely multifaceted. With that being said, and all that information out of the way, let's unbox the components. Just like I did with the VP312, I have switched over to my SM7B, which is being run through a completed VP28. I have also unboxed all of the components that are required to build two VP28 units in their entirety. As I stated in the VP312 video, I like to do these two at a time. If you are only doing one, then these are all of the components that you will need to complete one full unit. As with the 312, I have to state that there is a lot of off-camera prep work that goes into this. I highly recommend that you get yourself a resistor color code chart, or you either know them already before you start this project. I also highly recommend that you test every single individual component while you are beginning your layout process. This is not an easy project, and it is not for the faint of heart. This is significantly more complicated than the 312, and if you do not have solid assembly and soldering skills, I highly recommend that you do not take on this project. I like to do these one component at a time. I'm going to start with the resistors. Here I have them laid out on a sheet of notebook paper with their values and their respective positions on the main PCB. I like to do it this way because I find that it allows assembly to go smoothly and efficiently without any problems. This is what all of the gain stage resistors for both gain stage sections look like when they are soldered to the board. Here's what the completed sections look like on both PCBs. For the sake of time and keeping this video as short as possible, I'm going to speed through these sections quite quickly. We are now going to move on to the capacitors for the main PCB. And here we have all of the capacitors soldered in place on both PCBs. Now we're going to move on and handle all of the resistors for the main PCB. Here you can see them all laid out just like I did with the gain stage section. Here we have all of the resistors and the capacitors that are required for both the main PCB and gain stage sections. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay out all of the diodes, that way I have them ready to go for the next section. Now to prep the switches for installation, I like to use a little bit of masking tape to help hold them in place while I get everything situated. Then we flip the PCB and solder them into place. Now we prep all of the op-amp socket pins and get that ready to go. With the help of some masking tape, we get them fixed to the main PCB, and then we solder them in place like so. Now we can prep the 2622s. I prefer to do these after the socket pins, as it makes assembly so much easier than if you do it the other way around. Now at this point, I like to go ahead and install the stepped gain pots. The 2622 is almost the same height as each one of the respective pots. If you go ahead and do all three components at the same time, it makes things a lot smoother. Now that that's done and out of the way, we can move on to building each one of the high-pass filters. Each one is contained on its own mini PCB that gets bolted to the main PCB later on. Here we have all the caps installed, and here's the bottom side. Once the switches are in place, the high-pass filter is now complete. Alright, here we have both of the Litzwire 2623s ready to go. Once you bolt them to the PCB, you can then do a little nip and tuck to clean up the wiring, and now the main PCB is done and ready to go. Now we do a test fit to make sure that the pins align correctly. Now you can go ahead and bolt all of the components to the carrier, and once everything is aligned to the carrier, we can now begin final assembly because we're going to need to have the faceplate in order to line up all of our LEDs and other components. Now you want to flip the carrier over and solder all 5 of the high-pass filter pins. Here we have all of the op-amp kits ready to go. I went ahead and bought a bunch of different ones as I'm going to test out each unit with different op-amps later. I'm going to start with all of the caps and resistors for the CA0252. And now the diodes and transistors. And here's the completed CA0252 with the penny for size reference. Same procedure for the GAR2520s. And here we have the 0252s installed in the VP28. Now we can get the LEDs installed. This takes a little bit of finesse, and make sure that you install them in the correct orientation, because if you don't, you're going to have to take them back out and do it over again. With the LEDs and all installed, you can now do a quick power on test if you so choose. I highly recommend testing these on a dedicated testing jig, because if you power these on and you've done something wrong, you will pop smoke and something will scorch on the PCB and possibly damage your rack. Once you've gone ahead and done a quick power on test, you can now go ahead and install the knobs and get everything looking pretty. The last step is to drop in the colored inlays for each one of the knobs. I'm not going to do that because I'm making my own. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here. If you like this video or you found it helpful in any way, please give me a thumbs up. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you like my content and you want to see more, please subscribe and help support the channel. Stay tuned for part 2, where I test the VP28 on multiple sources, and I may also do a shootout between the 312 and the 28. And until next time, keep rocking.